Miami 2026. What a tournament, for a lot of reasons, good and bad. Rain delays, bagels, top seeds exiting left, right, and center. It's been a bizarre week on both tours, to say the least. Let's get into it. The men's and women's finals, the storylines leading up to them, and what really made this Miami Open one to remember. First things first, the craziest thing to me this year. What's supposed to be one of the flagship two-week Masters was essentially squeezed into just over a week because of some insane weather conditions. South Florida weather is notoriously Jekyll and Hyde, and as you can see even right now as I'm trying to record, it's still kind of spitting rain here. But all I can say here is just a massive credit to James Blake and the tournament organizers for pulling off these scheduled gymnastics and leveraging the facility to its fullest to actually get the matches out. The second half of the Sunshine Double, it's a quick turnaround from California over to Florida just a few days later, and with all the rain, these players haven't had a lot of time to adjust to the different courts. This has also been a thing this year. Miami is usually a lot faster than Indian Wells, with a court speed last year of 1.17 to Indian Wells' 0.8, but this year Indian Wells sped up to 1.09, well, it seemed like Miami's slowed down.
Usually I feel like it's kind of quicker in Miami, not too much, but a bit. This year it's slower because Indian Wells was faster.
As far as I can tell, the change has thrown the players off balance, and it's shown in the results. On the men's side, the draw pretty much collapsed from the get-go. Djokovic announced his withdrawal with a shoulder injury a week before, which would have opened up the draw for Musetti to get his own quarter as the fourth seed. Only then he dropped out too. And to be honest, some of these players didn't make much more of an impression. Draper, Ruud, and Bublik all fell in the round of 64. After Draper's marathon victory against Djokovic last week, I'm not surprised he's still a little fried. Plus, he's always been weaker in this half of the double. Coming up against a big server like Opelka in his first round was never going to be easy, especially when he struggled on the return in the past. Maybe also tired out from Indian Wells, Medvedev had something of a disaster in his second round match against Francisco Cerundolo, going down a bagel and a break before he finally got on the board.
Away that goes again. Daniel Medvedev with his head in his hands.
Spraying forehand errors all over the place, this is not the clean, gutsy Medvedev we saw beat Alcaraz at Indian Wells last week. A couple more breaks apiece, and he began to get his form back, dominating with that famous backhand. And in the end, it was a close match, but he just couldn't shed those errors. He lost it on a double fault.
A double fault, hands it.
But believe it or not, that wasn't even the most bizarre thing that happened that day either. The wires of the on-court spider cam got caught up in the umpire's chair. Mehdi, always a character, said maybe the operator was drunk. On the subject of top seeds collapsing, Alex de Minaur once again failed to solve the problem of Tsitsipas, losing in the round of 64 in straight sets. That puts their head-to-head at a disastrous 1-12, even with Tsitsipas' run of poor form lately. And speaking of poor form, it totally showed up in his very next match against Arthur Fils. Defeated with a bagel and a breadstick in just 55 minutes, Steph even lashed out at the umpire.
I can't see the ball. I don't know how he does it. I don't know how he sees it.
Unfortunately for him, Fils seemed to be able to see the ball just fine. And speaking of Fils, we've got to talk about the comeback that he's been having so far this year. I mean, the Doha final, the Indian Wells quarterfinal, and now the Miami semis. For a guy who was out of the game for 8 months after a stress fracture at Roland Garros last season, this is the kind of return to form any player would kill for. I think I'm going to have to do a deep dive on him soon, especially after that marathon he pulled off in the quarters against Tommy Paul. 2 hours and 49 minutes on court, no breaks of serve, and just a singular breakpoint for Fils, which came in the final set before the tiebreak. I couldn't stay in my seat for this match. Paul really upped the aggression, but Fils kept his cool when it mattered most, saving 4 match points at 2-6 in the deciding tiebreak to set up a match point of his own.
Oh, you are kidding me.
Somewhere in this tiebreak, the momentum really shifted, and this feels weird to say, but it feels like Paul kind of backed off a bit. Fils really started to dictate the points, and this new passivity from Paul was his undoing in the end. Look at the Fils backhand here. He didn't let the moment intimidate him, and he stayed in it, and when Paul tried to send him out wide, it wasn't wide enough. Fils was coming back for that ball, even if Paul hadn't put it in the net. Sometimes that's what makes the difference in these tight matches, right? This one was all about guts and holding his nerve. We didn't see the same in the semis though, where he was totally outplayed by Yuri Lehechka to set up another 2026 non-Sinkaraz final. This really wasn't on my bingo card. But what I bet was on some of yours was this guy. We were all watching out for Joao Fonseca this week, especially after that nail-biter against Sinner in Indian Wells. This time, he was in Alcaraz's half of the draw, and this time, the higher-ranked player absolutely dominated.
Oh, he's probably the best in the world.
Carlos was having none of it. He kept his cool in the face of a very hostile crowd and delivered a clinical 6-4, 6-4 result.
Well, he thought he'd won the point. Joao Fonseca.
He said, good match, congratulations, and keep going. You have a great future, so keep going.
But that was the round of 64. Fast forward to the round of 32, and our world number one has got big problems. Home favorite Sebastian Korda went out early at Indian Wells, but he came to Miami with a point to prove. Striking cleanly and mixing it up with some serve and volley, he outplayed Carlos to go up 6-3, 5-3. Carlos looked finished. But, and I should really know this by now, tennis isn't over until it's over. Facing some maybe understandable nerves, Korda couldn't serve it out and dropped 7 consecutive points to lose the second set 5-7. I mean, at that point, I thought for sure the American dream was over. Having come so close to someone so seemingly untouchable as Alcaraz, the mentality's gotta be gone. But Sebi proved me wrong. He broke again at 3-all in the third, and with 2 more confident service games, that was it. Sebi Korda had made the biggest win of his career, and Alcaraz had lost to his lowest-ranked opponent since world number 55 David Goffin in round 2 of Miami last year. If anyone's earned the right to have a few off matches, it's Carlos. But when you get to this level, and you're working with such fine margins, even your off days have to have something going on behind them. And it seems to me that what both Medvedev and Korda have highlighted recently is actually a serve problem. Those big break points, Carlos is going for a weirdly safe first serve. And it lets Korda take charge of the point. Look at the difference when he had his head in the game against Fonseca. A wide serve to throw Fonseca off balance, and then an aggressive +1. That's the kind of confidence he should be bringing every time. Now, I had to see if this was something that happened in isolation or if this was a trend, so I checked what this looked like across the rest of his matches in the ATP pressure points ranking. And I was kinda surprised by what I found. Alcaraz is 11th in the percentage of breakpoints saved rankings, which for a shorter player with other tools in his arsenal, that's still pretty great. But it also means he's not necessarily using the serve to get himself out of trouble. Meanwhile, Sinner is great at doing just that. He's number 2 in those rankings, by the way, just 0.1% behind Opelka, who's 6'11". And Sinner's serve has been firing on all cylinders this week. More on that later, though. What all of this means is that if Carlos does ever meet Jannik in a final again, that serve is going to be key. And it's a stat I'm going to be watching out for next time as well. Meanwhile, if we thought Korda was an underdog, his next opponent turned the whole dynamic around. 20-year-old qualifier Martin Landaluce beat him in 3 sets, saving a match point to make his first ever Masters quarterfinal.
He is dreaming big in Miami.
On the way, this kid also took out Marcus Giron, Luciano Darderi, and Karen Khachanov. It's an impressive run, and I don't think Korda should be too disappointed with his results here this week. With Korda as one of the standouts, it's really been a mixed bag for the American men this week. Lerner Tien went down early against world number 55 Kamil Majchuk, who bested him at his own counterpunching game and forced him onto the offense, which didn't go super well. Ultimately, Lerner played himself off of the court with an uncharacteristic number of errors. And then Ben Shelton too, in a 3-set loss to Alexander Shevchenko. That makes Ben 1-4 at his home state tournament, which has gotta hit pretty hard. Meanwhile, last year's semifinalist Taylor Fritz, who's had a pretty disappointing start to the year battling knee tendinitis, bulldozed fellow American Riley Opelka to set up a round of 16 confrontation with Lehechka, who took out Ethan Quinn the round prior. Lehechka upped the aggression and battled through a lapse of concentration in the second set to take it in 3. Honestly, this was kind of a shame, since Fritz was the last top 20 player left in the top half of the draw. He's gotta be thinking this could have been a real opportunity for him. Before the tournament, he said he'd be using the week to test out the knee.
So I think this week's gonna be really telling on how it feels. If it's not great, then I'll probably choose to take a little bit of time off.
And I know it's far from the result he had hoped for, but he looked pretty solid out there. Then again, he's going to want to get himself right for grass season, so who knows if we'll be seeing him on clay. He's already pulled out of Monte Carlo. With Shelton absent there too, it's not really a great start to clay season for the American side of the tour. Francis Tiafoe, meanwhile, was looking good this week. Defending champion Jakub Mensik saved 6 match points before Tiafoe finally closed it out on the 7th in a final set tiebreak. But unlike Mensik back in Doha, he had absolutely no answers for Sinner. And yeah, Sinner's had a pretty amazing week here in Miami. Dismantling yet another lefty, against whom he's 21-0 since 2023, a brutal mark, Sinner defeated Mute to break Djokovic's record for the most consecutive sets won at the Masters 1000 level, which stood at 24. Oh, and then he continued to break it. Coming up against Alex Michelsen, he faced a tricky moment down a break in the second, with Michelsen serving for it, but he came back to force a tiebreak, and the first point of that tiebreak was one for the ages. Not for nothing, Sinner is number 2 in the world, but every time Michelsen tried to get it past him, Sinner was there with some truly incredible defense. And offense, you could say, as early in the match, he managed to hit Michelsen himself with a brutal drive volley. But I don't think Michelsen's ego needs to be too bruised, though. He came very close to forcing a third, which would have broken that insane streak. Instead, Sinner hit the final without dropping a set, dismantling Alexander Zverev yet again in the semis. He's won their last 7 confrontations. Never mind that Zverev made more winners and less unforced errors in the first set, he still lost that set 3-6. And in his final 4 service games of the match, all the way up into the tiebreak, Jannik landed every single one of his first serves to within 27 centimeters of accuracy to the sidelines. That's insane. And so was his performance in the final. Coming into this, Jiri Lehečka had the worst odds in a Slam or Masters final since 2000. This is particularly wild to me because he'd also not been broken all tournament. Even Jannik had dropped serve once to Alex Michelsen. But it's not so much what Lehečka might do badly as what Sinner does really, really well. And that serve was absolutely key. The world number 2 was going into the final serving 12 aces per match and winning 85% of first serve points across the tournament. Yes, you heard that right. Jiri was going to have to up his return game big time if he wanted to stand a single chance. Even with those dire odds, there was a lot of suspense around this final, and it wasn't helped by the weather. We sat through hours of rain delays, while the women's doubles final was being moved to another court to make space in the schedule, and when it finally got going, I don't think I could blame either player for a nervy start. But in the end, it was Lehečka who fell first. At 1-all, he let slip some unforced errors to give Sinner 2 break points. He saved them with some clutch serving, only to give away the advantage with a sloppy forehand before Sinner, being Sinner, totally capitalized. Lehečka was broken for the first time all tournament. Now, one thing's for sure, he's a gutsy player. Sinner had ramped up the aggression to get the break, and in the very next game, Lehečka met him on those same terms to get 3 break points of his own. Love 40. This is where I sat up and thought, damn, this could be a thriller. But then there's that Sinner serve. What was I talking about with Alcaraz serving too safe in pressure points? Yeah, Sinner doesn't exactly do that. His accuracy is off the charts, and this serve placement says he knows it. He trusts where the ball is going to land, and in the final, it allowed him to win 5 points in a row to get out of that game. With that spot of worry now behind him, he cruised through the rest of the set, and Jiri looked out of ideas. I mean, what are you supposed to do when your opponent is winning 100% of his first serves beyond just praying he misses some? We started out the second set in a pretty similar spot, with Lehečka down 15-30 on his own serve. But then, in classic Miami fashion, the rain came, and oh boy was it dumping. The players went inside, where Jiri spent some time talking to his team, and Jannik just mainly kicked a football around. It was over an hour later that we got back underway, and this is when I noticed something change. After a couple service holds, Lehečka was once again down 2 break points at 1-all, but this time he played it differently. Both times he came forward to the net. There, he put away a couple of crisp volleys, saved the break points, and then actually escaped the game. And with the scoreboard pressure, I thought that maybe we could be seeing a momentum shift. Because what's key here is that after the rain delay, Lehečka was standing a full meter further inside the court on the return, so taking the ball so much earlier and really trying to dictate play. This was a whole new level of aggression from him. In the end, Lehechka just couldn't keep up. Serving at 4-all, the aggression on Sinner's return just simply outclassed him. Sinner sealed the break to serve for it, and so it was kind of a done deal. He closed it out cleanly, himself coming to the net with some careful touch to put some of those robotic baseliner allegations to bed. There's not much else I can say. It was a masterclass. Lehechka had a solid strategy, but it just wasn't enough to stop this guy from winning his first Sunshine Double. And he did it without dropping a single set. That's 34 consecutive sets at the Masters level, the most in history. The start of the season may have belonged to Carlos, but we're absolutely in Jannik's moment right now. And all this means is that it's going to be a very interesting clay season, with Alcaraz defending 4,330 points and Sinner defending just 1,950. Is that gap going to close, or are we going to see a big Carlos resurgence on the red dirt the way we did last year? And are we ever going to get a 2026 Sincaraz final? Now over to the WTA. The draw didn't collapse here quite as spectacularly as it did on the men's side, but there were still definitely some surprises. For starters, world number 3 Iga Swiatek's first round shocker. After totally dominating to win the first set 6-1, we all thought the Iga Bakery was firmly in business. But world number 50 Magda Linette stormed to a 3-set comeback, ousting the second seed. I checked, and before this week, Swiatek hadn't lost in the first round of any of her last 73 tournaments. She called it her worst nightmare, and then just a few days later, announced her split with her longtime coach, Wim Fissette. Will this be the wake-up call she and her team need to stop the rot? Because right now, the Sabalenka-Rybakina duopoly at the top of the WTA is looking pretty unstoppable, which makes it even weirder to me that they wound up in the same half of the draw. But let's come back to that. Jasmine Paolini continued to struggle with her form too, coming up against fellow doubles enthusiast Jelena Ostapenko in her second round and losing in 3 pretty variable sets. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens with her in clay season, because to me, it seems like the tour is finally understanding her game after underestimating her for far too long. Ostapenko, meanwhile, was stopped in her tracks by a seriously good Hailey Baptiste, who took out both Samsonova and Svitolina to set up a quarterfinal matchup with Sabalenka. There, she kept up with the world number 1 for as long as she could, but in the end, that pacey Sabalenka serve saved her in those crucial moments, like it so often does. Speaking of fast players, we lost Amanda Anisimova in an error-strewn performance against Belinda Bencic. I was really expecting the front half of this year to go better for her, but she won her first ever title on clay, so let's see what happens. Next up for Bencic was Coco Gauff, and this time it was the American who triumphed. I mean, you can't talk about Coco without talking about the serve, but this was as clean a performance as she's given all year. She served a comparatively low 5 double faults to 6 aces, and finding that key first serve in the big moments. After being forced to retire from Indian Wells with a wrist injury, it's been great to see her back out there so soon on such a fantastic run, and on responding to her fans' feedback.
Honestly, I saw a tweet that said I should go to the net more, and I was like, yeah, you're right, I win a lot of net points.
Coco then came up against a seriously in-form Karolina Muchova in the semis, but if there's a player Coco has figured out, it's totally her. Refusing to let Muchova find her feet for a second, Gauff delivered a double breadstick and cruised to the final. And now, we've really got to talk about that world number 1. With all the rain delays, the schedules were squeezed, and the organizers had to make some interesting decisions. Defending champion Sabalenka was relegated to the 3rd biggest court to make room for Alcaraz and Fonseca, and she wasn't happy about it.
I was like, but what's the problem for Alcaraz and Fonseca start later?
But this was the only blip for her in an otherwise almost perfect tournament. She made the final without dropping a set, totally dominating her arch-rival Rybakina in the semis. Not every matchup can be a blockbuster, right? Elena's forehand looked shaky, leaking 14 unforced errors to Aryna's 9, and producing just 6 winners to Aryna's 11. Meanwhile, the Sabalenka serve was a masterclass, winning 83% of first serves to Rybakina's 56%. This really wasn't even close. And so, into the final. Going into this one, the head-to-head was dead even, 6 apiece. Last year, Gauff won out at Roland Garros, but not at the WTA finals. And it was Riyadh that I was looking at to get an idea of how Coco might try to play this. In that first set, she was totally dominating, and Sabalenka was down a break and a break point. And like usual for Gauff, this was all about the serve. She was maximizing her first serves by going for slow, high-bouncing kickers that forced Sabalenka to return out of her strike zone. If Gauff had managed to keep this going back then, she could have totally had the whole match in the bag. But the double faults crept in, and she quickly lost her confidence. coming into Miami, then she knew exactly what she had to do. It was just a matter of going out and executing. From the very start, she had problems. Serve issues began early, and she was down a break in no time. Her strategy of switching up the pace and shape of the ball came up against Sabalenka's own unpredictability because she was changing up her return position constantly, really challenging the Goff serve and coaxing her into that fatal double fault. The world number one quickly took the first set in 38 minutes. But in the second, something changed. We talk a lot about Coco's serve, but her forehand's also famously an issue. But not today. She made just 11 unforced errors on that side throughout the match, where Aryna made 12. And in the second set, there was a level of control that really showed. She kept pace with Sabalenka through some really tricky games, taken from game point 40-love to break point at 2-all, but she stayed in it, no doubt boosted by the home crowd, which got pretty rowdy. From my experience on the grounds here at the Miami Open, the tennis fans here are just a reflection of the broader Miami community. It's loud, it's crazy, some of these tennis matches feel like football matches, but it just kind of is what it is, and there's no denying the electric energy on every single court. Sabalenka, meanwhile, looked uncharacteristically tight, but Goff kept it coming back. With the scoreboard on her side, she broke Sabalenka's serve at 5-4 to even up the match. Coco started out the third serving, and with a fatal double fault at 40-30, she completely let Aryna back into the match. The world number one then sealed an early break, and that tightness evaporated. From then on, she played as cleanly and aggressively as ever. Despite the intervention of an increasingly hostile crowd, Coco couldn't generate any more break points, with Aryna winning 83% of her first serves in the final set and closing it out with a second break to claim her very first Sunshine Double. It also means she's been defeated just once this year, and she's now equaled Swiatek's 11 Masters 1000 titles. Only Serena now stands in her way of the record with 13. Oh, and her run these last few weeks has been really convincing for me. Right now, I'm struggling to see a world where she's dethroned as world number one anytime soon. And there we have it. No more hardcourt tennis until the end of July, and I'm excited for the switch. Will the natural surfaces shake things up, bringing players like Musetti and Paolini to the forefront? Or is the dominance at the very top of each tour just too good? It was so great running into a bunch of you on the grounds here at the Miami Open, talking tennis, watching some matches, and above all, hearing what you guys want to see me do next here on Courtside. If you haven't already, definitely smash that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our clay season coverage. And until next time, keep going for the Lions.